get a perspective on the current outlook for the transportation and logistics industry from Juan Cazorla. He's head of the Transportation and Logistics Specialized Industry Group of Regions Bank. Hello, Juan.
Hi, Bob. Great to be here. Thanks for having me today.
And thank you for joining me. So just sum up for me, if you will, please, to start here, what you see as the key challenges that are in store for ports, transportation, and logistics in 2022.
Yeah, I think there are many, and I think irrespective of the mode of transportation that you're talking about, human capital and human capital that is healthy is probably one of the biggest challenges. I mean, you run the gamut from the trucking sector where there's a dearth of qualified drivers. I think COVID certainly exacerbated that. Many truck drivers, retired, some got furloughed, some never came back. So that's a pernicious problem for the trucking sector. When you fast forward to the ports, it's a similar problem. The port system, as we all know, is a little fractured right now. But part of the issue with respect to when containers come to the United States from overseas, whether it's the port of LA, Long Beach, what have you, part of the logjam, if you will, is a function of the fact that there are not enough port workers. Healthy port workers, and in some cases with the current Omicron variant, people are calling in sick. So it's very difficult, if you're a shipper or a receiver of freight, to think that what used to be a normalized, synchronized delivery pattern, is just kind of gone by the wayside. And to state the obvious, the Omicron variant is something that the COVID-19 and the resulting variants are obviously things that. It looks like they're going to be a permanent part of the landscape. So obviously that's a factor as well.
Okay, well, you just described very well the human factor, but there's also issues of availability of equipment, which may also be tied into the human factor one way or another. But is there also a separate issue just about the infrastructure, the physical infrastructure of transportation and logistics that has for some reason failed to deliver on what's needed from it right now?
Yeah, when I hear that question, I think of two things. First, as you suggested, the port system. The infrastructure of the ports is just not sufficient. I think the obvious e-commerce boom that's brought forth 3 to 5 years of e-commerce spend has really strained the system, and so we were not ready. I don't think anyone was ready for that. You make a great point on the equipment side of things. We do a lot of business with the container guys, the truck leasing guys, across the spectrum. And so if you talk about trucking again, Class 8 orders for trucks are just, the lead time for deliveries is way up. And so, as you suggested, with more volume, more demand for transportation services, that problem, the lack of available equipment, is an issue. And sticking with the trucking theme again, it's not just the trucks, but it's the trailers. I recently met with a truck trailer lessor who is obviously sitting in the catbird seat in this environment. They're charging record rates, and what's happening for the users of those services is they're on the other side of the trade. So two things are happening. Number one, the duration of the contracts as these leases come off, mature, the leases are getting extended to a longer period of time and at a higher rate. So it's, there's pain up and down the spectrum, but I do think the silver lining is that the transportation sector in general is in good shape. It's just there are more landmines that everybody's having to navigate.
But back to this issue of equipment, the chassis for the trucks are also a serious problem. And what we're being told is it's not so much that there aren't enough of them, it's that they're in the wrong place. That upwards of 80% of the chassis out there are sitting idle in parking lots with a trailer on top of them, and they can't be used. How do we get to that state of affairs? I mean, that wasn't the case before, was it?
No, it was not. And, it's just, I think it's, the asynchronous supply chain that we're in today just, has helped or really paved the way for that. I think a lot of companies are addressing that by using technology. The bigger trucking guys are are perhaps a little more adept at finding their available fleet. I think you could extend what you just suggested to the container world, right? It's not the availability of the containers; it's that they might be stuck in container yards where there's a backup for in these container yards for how they were stacked, and again, not enough workers to man the port. So it's an interesting dynamic.
Well, we are past the holiday peak shopping season, although we're still seeing pretty heavy volumes. Have we seen any relief whatsoever? Any signs of that yet?
Great question. I guess that I'd answer that by saying it depends on who you ask. I think I read both sides. The publications I read, I see both answers. I think the more convincing answer, given the data at this point, is that we're going to be in for this period, if you will, for another 12 months, at least through 2022. Wow. Perhaps into 2023. That's the view that seems to be shared. The good news is, if there is good news, is that 2021 provided a lot of people a lot of lessons, and as a result of the e-commerce boom that we've had, there's been there are a lot of elements of supply chain and logistics that have sprung up, and we can talk about those if you like.
Well, you alluded earlier in the conversation to the notion of the permanent changes that might be occurring to logistics and transportation as a result of this crisis going forward. What might some of those be?
Yeah, I think the real catalyst from my perspective, or from our perspective, is e-commerce, right? E-commerce, people that weren't buying things online are now buying things online. And so with the supply chain being much more complex than it used to be, we've just seen a continued need or a proclivity by those users of transportation services, mainly logistics, of outsourcing those services to providers that are geared to do that. There's some big companies, big, medium-sized, and smaller companies that are geared to do that, but continued outsourcing of warehouse and transport logistics services. The other thing that we're seeing is a lot of a big focus on warehouse and distribution. You're just seeing warehouses pop up, not just from the big public retailer that we can all think of, but other warehouses, in both in rural and urban areas where available. Mm-hmm. And so just, I would say that just a lot of the things that we're seeing relate back to e-commerce, and just with everybody buying more things online, the notion of reverse logistics when people return things, that's a big deal, and it's costly. It's much more complex than, going into a store and returning a pair of shoes that you bought. There's just a lot more. It's generally, call it, 30+% more expensive to return something that you bought online, at least for the retailer. Mm-hmm. And so those are some of the things that we're seeing. Obviously, the last mile, again, related to e-commerce is a big deal, and I think there's an opportunity there, because not every retailer has the available warehouse space to efficiently deliver product, in 1 to 2 days. So that becomes an important dynamic as well.
If we're talking about the real long term, do you take any optimism from the passage of the infrastructure bill, the releasing of funds to fix or to increase or improve the quality of the transportation and logistics infrastructure going forward, so that this kind of crisis might not happen again if the same set of circumstances arises?
Absolutely, yes. It's Rome wasn't built in a day, but you got to start somewhere. I mean, we've been talking about fixing our quote unquote a crumbling infrastructure for some time now. I think the time for action is now, and certainly I think we're headed in the right direction. That's the silver lining. The reality is a lot of these things take time. I did hear of the port of I think the port of Savannah is expanding now. I mean, and so there are things that are happening, and I think we're headed in the right direction. But certainly, I think it's going to take some time. Mm-hmm. I think one area where weakness was clearly evident. It goes back to your question on trucks and what have you. Is again, we need to re-examine our the entirety of where we're manufacturing, and obviously we were exposed on chips. About an eighth of call it 12.5% of chips are manufactured. The chips that we use are manufactured here. The rest are in China and Taiwan. So I think that the reshoring of that kind of manufacturing, again, over time, it's going to take time and money. But I think we've learned some important lessons as a country as a result of what's happened.
Well, challenging year ahead, but maybe a brighter picture going forward after that. Juan Cazorla of Regions Bank, again, I want to thank you so much for taking the time with me to offer your outlook for the transportation and logistics industry. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Bob. Appreciate it.